All right. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon for the Liberty Technology Advisors May webcast. Today, we're going to be talking about structuring the ideal team for an ERP implementation. And this month, we are going to be joined again by Joel Schneider, President and founder of Liberty Technology Advisors. Just a quick overview on Joel. Joel has been in the industry for over 25 years. He's been working at LTA for over 22 years. When it comes to his core competencies, Joel's really done it all, from contract negotiation, system selection and implementation, to project rescues, merger and acquisitions. So Joel's really, he's had experience in a lot of different areas, and I think that makes him more than qualified to join us today to talk a little bit more about structuring an ideal team for an ERP implementation. But before Joel does join us to start talking, I did want to just briefly give an overview of Liberty Technology Advisors and who we are. We are a strategic management consulting company that's been around since 1995. We really help our clients improve their business, whether that's business performance, business systems, or their processes. We help with ERP and software selections and implementations. We offer IT road mapping, business process reengineering, digital transformation. Basically, if there's a way for us to help make your business better, we're going to help you get there. And just here is a quick overview of those services that we offer. And again, project management, business IT strategy, we're here to help you. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about who should own an ERP implementation project, who should manage that project, talk a little bit about internal and external resourcing, and then the overall team hierarchy. So without further ado, let's welcome Joel.
Good afternoon.
And let's go ahead and get started with the first question. So Joel, we often hear from companies that their IT department is going to own the project when it comes to ERP implementation. What are your thoughts on this, and who do you think should be the owner of an ERP implementation?
That's a great question. First, thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. Brad, thanks for the introduction and the kind words. It's really an interesting question when we talk about who should own the project. There is no one size fits all for any ERP implementation project. Every company is different, and every organization is different, and every ERP project is different. But owning a project is very important, that somebody owns it. That would be what we would call the project sponsor. It's not the day-to-day person, but somebody has to be the person who's responsible for the success of the overall project. So usually it's business-led, so many times it's a CFO, COO, or CIO role. So the IT person can many times be the owner as long as they are in that executive position. So if they're the project sponsor, they're the person who's going to do it. Many companies think you want an outside person owning a project. We're pretty clear that ownership of a project must be led by internal company resources. As we all know, ERP projects are business projects, and these are business decisions that are being made. Although every ERP project touches technology, it's all about the technology and business processes. It really isn't a technology decision every single day. So we want someone involved in the business to drive this. So the bottom line is these are business-led people. CIO, CFO, COO, or presidents of the company will lead this project. But that's from the ownership perspective of the project. So that's our view. And it all has to do with the organization structure. But as Brad mentioned in the introduction, we're going to get into team hierarchies later.
Great. So now that we know who owns the project, who should be the person who's managing the project?
So I think that's a good follow-up question to the first one, the difference between owning a project and managing the project. You know, owning and managing are different. You want someone to manage the project who is an experienced project manager. The project manager needs to be someone who has authority, who has experience, who knows the business operations, and has that seat at the table, because it's all about someone who can make decisions every single day when it comes to an ERP implementation project. They have to navigate the company, the operations, and can speak for all departments. So project manager is a key role for an ERP implementation. Someone who ideally would be knowledgeable about overall projects, the business, who's really great at delegating and following up and managing teams that are going to be stressed out and spending a lot of time on a project. So someone who's going to be dedicated to managing an overall ERP implementation project, not someone who's going to spend 5% of their day on this. So owning is the project sponsor. Project management is another great resource that's going to be responsible to make decisions, have the authority to make decisions, have a seat at the table, and is going to be intimately involved in the day-to-day details of the project. So it's a key role for a successful ERP project. Once again, the project manager would most likely report to the project sponsor or some type of steering committee, and we'll get into organization structure later, which is critical to success.
Perfect. The next question, got a couple parts. So companies have different needs and capabilities. When it comes to these types of projects, what are the kinds of resourcing that you typically see? And then to follow up, what are the pros and cons of internal versus external resources, and what tasks are usually pushed towards an external resource?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there, so let's see if I can take them one at a time. When it comes to ERP projects, what kind of resourcing do we typically see? It's really important we put the best resources from your company on this project. And I know that's just the opposite of what a lot of companies want to do, is put the best resources on a project because they're the best that are running the business day to day. But they're the people with the true knowledge of the business processes at your company and how to improve your business processes with the application of a new system, whether it's an ERP project, an e-commerce project, or any type of major project. You want your best people on it. So internally, you need to own all the business analysis, all the BAs, if you will, and most important, the subject matter experts. They're the team members that you have from your company who know the business inside and out. External resources, the other half of that question, would be focused more on things that you don't do every day, somewhere that you want to use an outside resource because you don't implement ERP systems every day. So someone who's experienced in the process of implementing ERP solutions, project management, business process reengineering, and change management. Those are the outside resources you want to bring to the table. So again, we would view it as active project management, business process reengineering, and organizational change management. If you put it all together, it's oversight. You want someone, so the other part of the question is what tasks are usually pushed to an external resources. You want someone who has done this before, who knows the pitfalls, who knows the things to look out for a successful implementation. So you want to utilize external resource for that guidance for an ERP implementation project. So your internal resources know your business. You don't want to use external resources to do your internal subject matter expertise. That's why your team is there. So you want to only use external resources for areas where you don't have that expertise. Usually business process, change management, overall project management, or guidance or oversight for the project.
Great. Just a reminder, if anyone has questions during the presentation, please just go ahead and type them in, send them in the chat. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that come through. So on to the next question then. What are the pros and cons of using an internal resource versus a software reseller project manager versus an independent consulting company?
There's a little bit of add on to the previous question, the way I'm reading it, we talked about the pros and cons of using an internal versus external person for project management and how it comes together. Now it looks like the question talks about, where does that software reseller or VAR come into this? Critical component for a successful implementation is that software reseller or VAR. You can't be successful without the expertise, the functionality, the expertise of how that software works and the capabilities of that software and how that software can be configured to meet your business requirements, your functionality, and your business processes. So internally, you want to use your internal resources to navigate all your internal business processes and issues. Your VAR, they're phenomenal if you pick out the right VAR. There's great ones out there. Great at managing their software and their implementation. Without them, you're not going to be successful. Critical component of the overall ERP organization structure. On the other side, the last part is independent consulting company. Once again, you want to use those for project oversight. That independent consulting firm will look at the overall business and how to successfully implement the business versus the software or just one component of your business. So the external consultant will be that project manager, oversight, who's been there, done it multiple times. And most importantly, not just work with the reseller, not just work with the internal company resources that you have, but most importantly, work with all the constituents to make a successful ERP project a success. You have software, you might have cloud services, internet connectivity, EDI connectivity, e-commerce connectivity, barcode, label printing. There's a multiple and varied, multiple sources of technologies that all have to come together. So you want that outside third party to coordinate all those different constituents so it all comes together in a real orchestrated way. So without the reseller, you're not going to be successful. Without the internal resources, you're not going to be successful. We believe using a third-party independent consultant to coordinate all the different activities, all the different parties is critical. And putting all those components on one consolidated project plan, it's a key component for success.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about the owners and managers, but we want to ask you what's the typical team hierarchy look like for an ERP implementation?
So this is sort of like puts it all together, the hierarchy. So usually you want to put that organization structure in place prior to starting your project. So at the top, you'll have some type of steering committee, which will be about 5 or 7 representatives at the executive level of your company. Someone that represents the major groups, whether it's finance, operations, sales, marketing, e-commerce, product development, engineering. They're going to have that steering committee. And the role and responsibility of the steering committee needs to be defined prior to the start so they understand what their role is. For example, a key role of a steering committee is to allocate resources. Resources would be both time, which is people, and dollars. And the other thing the steering committee will do is manage scope. If there's a scope change, only the steering committee can approve a scope change to the project. Underneath that, you'll have some type of project manager, internal, external, combination of both, and a project sponsor, and that sponsor is a member of the steering committee. And then off to the side, very often, we would suggest an independent third-party QA role, someone who takes a view and QAs the project. Quality assurance, all the major steps to make sure that they're just not completed, but completed well according to quality to make sure that you get the result you're looking for. Underneath that will be your project team members. You'll have the VAR team. You'll have your internal consulting team, your subject matter experts, and once again, all those third parties we talked about, barcode vendors, EDI vendors, cloud services, internet connectivity, label printing, et cetera, e-commerce. That team is all coordinated by the project manager who's got the project team up to the steering committee. So we put together, and you put together, most importantly, a good hierarchy, a good project organization, you're set up for success. And then the steering committee, the project manager, the project sponsor, the QA, and the project team members all have documented and agreed upon roles and responsibilities. It becomes a very well-oiled machine. So it's really important it's done first. And this question, although it's looks like question 5 on the list, this should be number 1 on your to-do list prior to starting a project, putting that organization together. That's very important.
All right, thank you, Joel. So now we're going to open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead and submit those through the chat or through the Q&A. Looks like we did have one come through so far, so please definitely keep sending them in if you have any. Joel, so the question is, what would you suggest if you have a team member who is adamant about being the project manager, but you know your company would benefit from an outside party?
Good question. So if you have a project team member, if I'm reading it right, who's adamant, who wants to be the project manager, but you also are considering an outside third party, if the person is motivated, really thinks this would be a good experience, the leadership thinks it would be a good experience for that individual, I would definitely make them part of the process. And maybe even more than part of the process, maybe make them a co-project manager, and companies such as LTA can mentor that individual and how to manage a complex technology project used from multiple constituents, multiple departments, multiple teams at your company. So we're all in favor of having people involved, is once again, as long as we go back to that previous question about organization structure. Teams working well together is what makes a project go well. When you start talking about silos, that's when projects get derailed. So good question, all in favor of people being part of the team who are really excited about it. The more the better.
Great. All right, next one that came in. Any trends you see and why ERP projects go bad? I've read in many articles that PM and organizational change are 2 big culprits.
So I think I heard that question. Was the second part was the 2 culprits were organizational change. What was the other thing?
Project management.
Project management. So how do projects get off the rails, if you will? Yes, of course. Change management is critical. It's often overlooked, and like I said before, using an outside consulting firm for project management, business process reengineering, and change management. So change management is critical to the success of a project. An experienced project manager is. The other thing that we see very often is projects, ERP projects take 6, 8, 9 plus months to get done. There's project fatigue, and you need to have that strong leadership in place that's committed to the project that will pave the way for success. You're on a mission, you see the goal line, you drive for that goal line, and you make things happen. So change management is an area that derails a project because it's not done well or upfront. Change management is critical from day one, not just through completion, but afterwards. It's all about communications, communications. Can't stress it enough. Project management obviously is important, but support from top leadership is critical. So I would add that.
Great. All right, so it looks like we got a couple more here. What kind of planning tools do you find are the most helpful in laying out the project plan and tracking for the delegation of responsibilities?
So most people utilize one of 2 things, some type of Microsoft project plan, which I'm sure everyone has seen. It's very common, very easy to lay out. It has all the roles, tasks, dependencies, and most importantly, identifies who's going to do what. A lot of people will roll that into 2 other things. One, a detailed Excel spreadsheet. People don't have Microsoft Project on their desktop, so they can convert that into Excel and see the same view, and that way it's people can see it. However, the key to a good project management tool, in addition to the tool itself that's detailed, that is complete. So that's the key thing. It's not just the project plan for the VAR or for the barcode vendor, but it includes change management activities, data conversion activities. It's one big plan. And then what makes it really successful is the communication of that plan to all the members of the project team, from the steering committee down to the project sponsors, the project manager, QA, project team members, that everyone sees it. Project plans are not, should not, and should never be top secret. They have to be shared and communicate with everyone. As long as they're complete, everyone can see what they have to do. Not to drag on this question, but the thing that you have to be concerned about when you put a project plan together is not to assume any person understands what that task means or how to do it. Once again, this may be new to most people doing an ERP project, so that project manager, usually from the outside who's done this before, can really help project team members understand what the task is, how to do it, and make sure it's done properly. So those are the tools that we use.
Great. All right. And the last one we got here is outside consultants might not be pushing the project fast enough. It's not necessarily in their interest. Who from the company should be pushing for the project to be timely?
That's an interesting question. Not sure I agree from our standpoint. We want projects to be completed as quick as possible. The faster the result, the better. But that project plan with that end goal in mind is done up and done up. It is identified in the beginning of the project. So if you have a 6-month project, you're striving for that. If you can close the gap and make it 5 months, all the better. But we want to finish projects sooner rather than later. There's no advantage to stretching out a project whatsoever. There's project fatigue, cost goes up, the client doesn't like it, the software vendor doesn't like it, we don't like it. We want projects to go live, and we want our clients to go live sooner rather than later. That's our goal every single time.
All right. It looks like we had one more come in. ERP implementations are notorious for taking more time and money than budgeted. Do you recommend telling your client to have a contingency budget to account for inevitable scope and timeline changes and unexpected costs? If yes, what is an appropriate range for that contingency budget?
So a contingency budget, I have nothing wrong with putting a 5 to 10% contingency budget in there. However, I do not agree with the concept that it's for scope changes. There might be minor scope changes. Usually what happens in a contingency is unforeseen things happen during an implementation. A key person leaves that's on the project. The project has to take a turn for some reason. In other words, a competing company resource. Maybe you buy another company and therefore the project gets delayed for a while. Those are the reasons why you have contingency. If you understand the scope of the project prior to beginning the project, have a well-documented project charter that documents the scope in detail that everybody agrees to with that timeline, you probably shouldn't be doing a lot of scope expansions. Contingency is good because of unforeseen things that happen during a project, but I'm not sure it's for scope changes. Good question, very interesting topic. We could probably have a whole webinar on how to manage scope. Matter of fact, Brad, why don't we have one on managing scope next month?
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. If you do have other questions, definitely go ahead and send them out to us, and we'll be happy to reach out to you and answer those as they come in. But again, my email address is on there, brad.robinson@ltadvisors.com, or you can give us a call. Thank you guys for joining us. Keep your eye out for a follow-up email from us that's going to have a quick 1-minute survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could give us your feedback so we can make sure that these are interesting and beneficial to you moving forward. And if you want to tune in, keep your eye out for our June webcast, which will be on digital transformation in the manufacturing industry. And July, we'll be talking about system selection in distribution. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with those links, as well as a link to the recording. And we appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us.